ABBA. You know the songs, you know the costumes, you probably think you know the story. But their journey to becoming one of the biggest bands on the planet wasn't what you'd expect. It wasn't about touring the world. In fact, it was built on avoiding it. And in their quest for perfection, they accidentally ended up inventing the future. Twice. See, back in 1977, this is what people thought. ABBA was seen as this perfect, studio-polished machine. Critics were absolutely convinced that it was all just a studio trick, a sound that was way too clean to ever survive the chaos of a live show. But on their now legendary tour of Australia, they didn't just prove the skeptics wrong, they blew them away. So the real question wasn't if they could pull it off live, the real question was, why would they even want to? And that question, right there, leads us to the very heart of their story, what I like to call the perfection paradox. This massive gap between their flawless studio image and the messy, unpredictable reality of a rock and roll show. I mean, just look at this. Their 1977 Australian tour was pure chaos. It was like a disaster movie playing out in real time. We're talking cyclonic rain, a stage so wet that Frida slipped and fell, sending her wig flying. And to top it all off, a giant swarm of bugs just descended on the stage lights. For a band completely obsessed with control, this was an absolute nightmare. But here's the thing. For the fans standing out there in the rain, none of that mattered. As this one concert-goer, Roxanne Dixon, put it, the connection was just electric. Through all of that mayhem, the magic was totally real. The audience was just completely lost in the moment. And get this, even the toughest critics had to admit it. They basically had to eat their own words. Against all odds, ABBA could perfectly replicate their studio sound live on stage. And this is what creates the big paradox. If they were so incredibly good at touring, why did they hate it so much? Why would this be their last major tour ever? Well, to solve that touring problem, they ended up stumbling onto an idea that would literally change music forever. It pushed them into their next phase, where they became these accidental pioneers of music video. The truth is, the band just wasn't interested in that grueling life on the road. They were studio artists, not road warriors. They found all the travel and the unpredictability totally draining. So pretty much out of necessity, they became one of the first huge bands to really invest in promotional music videos. It was a genius way to be everywhere in the world at once without ever having to leave their studio in Sweden. They teamed up with a young director, a guy named Lasse Hallström, who basically created a whole visual language just for them. For the upbeat songs like Dancing Queen, he'd put them in a disco. For the sad ones, he'd have Agnetha or Frida looking all alone and thoughtful. And he created this signature camera style, the one I'm talking about, framing them in these really striking, perpendicular eye lines that just became iconic. They were building a visual brand that reached millions of people right in their living rooms. But even after the band split up in the early 80s, the story was so far from over. In fact, their legacy was about to explode in ways that absolutely no one could have seen coming, jumping across all kinds of different media. The early 90s, man, that was the big turning point. All of a sudden, it was cool to love ABBA again. U2, one of the biggest bands in the world, started covering Dancing Queen. Erasure put out a tribute EP that shot straight to #1. Then came ABBA Gold, a compilation that sold, over 30 million copies now? And then you had these two incredible Australian movies, Muriel's Wedding and Priscilla, that introduced their music to a whole new generation. So how do you explain this massive comeback? Well, there's actually a term for it, from a media scholar named Henry Jenkins, transmedia storytelling. The basic idea is that a story unfolds across a bunch of different platforms, and each one adds a new piece to the puzzle. ABBA's story wasn't just in their songs anymore. It was now being told through movies and tribute albums and musicals. Which brings us right up to today, and the final, absolutely mind-bending chapter in their quest for perfection. This is their ultimate solution to the whole problem of performing live. The tech behind the ABBA Voyage show is just wild. Okay, first thing you need to know, they are not holograms. They're these super realistic CGI avatars, or ABBAtars, of the band back in their prime. To make them, the real ABBA members performed for weeks in motion capture suits, and all that data was used to create these digital versions that are shown on these enormous, super high-res screens. And for a lot of people who see it, the effect is just incredibly powerful. Like this fan on Reddit says, the experience is so real and so emotional that you kind of just forget you're not watching the real thing. It's like the ultimate suspension of disbelief. But for other people, that perfection is actually the problem. This fan points out what's known as the uncanny valley effect. These digital avatars are so perfect, they're almost inhuman. They don't sweat, they don't make mistakes, they never even seem to take a breath. All those tiny little imperfections that make a live performance feel, well, alive, they're gone. So let's just pull back for a second and look at this whole incredible journey. From that chaotic, rain-soaked stage in Australia all the way to a perfectly controlled digital arena in London. This comparison really says it all, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the total chaos of 1977, accidents, bugs, bad weather. On the other, the digital perfection of 2022, flawlessly executed every single night in a custom-built, climate-controlled bubble. They have finally achieved total and complete control over their own performance. And that right there is the ultimate irony of ABBA's career. By trying so hard to escape the unpredictable grind of live shows, they ended up inventing a new kind of live show that could, in theory, run forever. They've literally engineered their own immortality. So, I'll leave you with this question to chew on. Is this the next step in the evolution of concerts? A way for our musical heroes to perform for all time? Or is it something else? A beautiful, flawless, but maybe ultimately hollow echo of what live music is really supposed to be?